Unique New York.
Unique New York. Oh, I can't
Yeah,
do
you got to
that.
say it too. How now, brown cow? How now,
Brown cow. There we go.
Get yourself warmed up. Keep that rolling. Keep going. Keep going. That's good. We're going to leave that in. That's all good stuff.
So, John, I know recently you had a charity race that raised some money, but I wanted you to tell me a little bit about it because I always thought that was pretty fascinating.
So yeah, I think we talked about this in a episode last year, really. But this is the second year I've done this. My wife's been doing it for I think 6 years now, and so it's a camp that she has donated time to and is raising money for, and they use this race and they're around the country. It's called the Ragnar Run, and if you've ever done one of these, it's a relay race, and it's a road race from a particular distance. It's generally their running joke is it's 200-ish miles, and so this one we did it in Michigan. We started in Traverse City, Michigan. I was runner number one. I started at 5 a.m. and we started at 5 a.m. and somebody has to be on the course the entire time until you get to Muskegon. And generally it's 30 some hours later. And so you have 12 runners and you just rotate through. And runner 1, 2, and they have stopping points and they have it set up, right? There is actually a course. So my first run was 6.1 miles. The next person was 7.4. That, so everybody has their, but you run between, 15 and 20 miles each runner, during that
time. How many people are on your team?
Like we have 2 vans and 6 runners, and it will be in one van, and you'll run runners 1 through 6, and then you pass the baton off to runners 7 through 12, and you get some rest while they're running, and then vice versa, they rest while you're running and whatnot. So
was there any that just had 2 that ran 100 miles themselves?
They call them ultra teams, and there are some teams that have stuff, and it's really interesting because you get to what's called an exchange, and you have like a slap bracelet, and that's how you know who the runner is that's supposed to be on the course. And so you get to still have to go into the exchange. You can't continue to run by. So particularly you're running down a street, well, you got to turn into a parking lot at a church, let's say, and you got to run down to where the exchange is, and they would run in and they would, did you guys register me? Yes. Okay. And then they would turn and run out. And it was like, you're excited for them. That's really cool, but you also want to boo them because who can keep running, 100 miles? It's kind of,
that's crazy.
Still running. I ran just over 17 miles in 3 different legs. And
yeah.
A lot of it was uphill. It was cool. It was fun. I was pleased with it, but it was still, at the end of that, I was done. I couldn't imagine running more.
No, that's crazy. But
yeah, neat experience though. It's you really don't sleep by the time you get prepped beforehand and you're done, you really don't sleep a whole lot for, let's say, 2 days, 48 hours or so, but you're wired, you're excited, you're having fun with a group of people, but you're also raising money for a good cause, so it's a
good
really
excuse
cool
to raise some money, right?
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
No, it's so fun. We like to do like some charity golf outings as well. And in fact, we were just golfing, you and I, last week, and there was a nice, big, huge golf event that had, for breast cancer.
Sure.
And it was just kind of cool to see all the pink, all the golf course,
all the different pink outfits, guys and gals, everybody different stuff. Yeah, that was really fun to see. That was a really exciting thing. So yeah, any chance they get to to do that, that's really cool to see.
Yeah.
too.
So we saw that and said, you know what, maybe next year we'll join in on that one because it looked like a great event that they had as well. All right, John. So I know we, today we want to talk a little bit more about, what does it look like, as far as we talked a little bit about our proprietary process last time, but in general, whether it's, with us or whether it's with another advisor that you're dealing with, what does an analysis look like? Okay.
Always important when people are listening to this. If you're looking for an advisor, you know how to get a hold of us, right? And hopefully if you're interviewing us in that situation, but if you're just looking to listen in going, what should I be looking for in my life? And whether it's us or somebody else, what should I be looking for an analysis? What does that entail? What are the questions I should even ask, right? And a lot of people don't know even what they should be looking for. So I think that's a really good conversation point.
Yeah. And again, why a lot of people choose us to begin with is because we do look at through many different lenses, whether it's risk, whether it's fees, whether it's taxes, whether it's the state, the estate planning itself. But we want to make sure that, a lot of the analyzing tools that are out there and a lot of with the technology, especially nowadays, they can really analyze pretty in depth with a lot of these things.
Absolutely. And I think it's a unique subject for people, right? When you talk about finances, not everybody wants to look at it every day. Not everybody knows what to ask for. A lot of people just, hey, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't want to have to think about this. And so when you get into analysis, you can really get into the weeds and you can really get kind of overwhelmed with stuff. What is important in this conversation today, I think, is what are the benchmarks you should see, and whether you want to see them or not, you should at least know these things, or at least have an idea where to find these answers. And then we'll talk a little bit more about like kind of what's unique about us, right? We might as well at least say that too. We do a little bit of different stuff, but
yeah, and it does become important when you're doing the analyzing themselves and using some of these tools that are out there. There's just so many tools that we can use.
Well, I don't know if you remember this, Mike. Years ago, I want to say it was 4 or 5 years ago. It was actually before the pandemic, so that was a different world. It felt like we were at one of those big conventions, and we were out in San Diego, and you and I, our producer Jason, we were all out there together, and there was an entire floor at a hotel that was just technology and research on financial stuff. And they were advertising to us, the advisors, right? You go to the convention hall and you go to the booths, my gosh, hundreds of booths of just different financial planning software, technology software, analysis software, reviews, et cetera. And for somebody that would not be in the industry, it would be certainly overwhelming. For us, it was still almost
information overload,
right?
For sure.
Yeah. But there's a lot out there.
And so, throughout the years, that's a good point, John. One of the reasons we've chosen a lot of the different things that we have is there's been a lot of research done, not only by us, but we're both members of high-level advisor groups from across the country. And so we have think tanks and try to find the best technology out there. And then, of course, we have people in the back office that do a lot of the demos, and see which ones might work best for us and for prospects and clients.
Well, and I think that's one of the really important things is there's some unbelievable ways to review and analyze and look at things, but it doesn't really matter what we know, right? It doesn't really matter what's there. I mean, that's important to make sure we're doing a proper job, but it really matters how can it be communicated to the person listening, to the person that we're talking with, to the person maybe listening to this podcast. How do you know and have faith in it? Hey, we can say, hey, we did this analysis through this and all these new crazy ways. But if it doesn't give you peace of mind, if it doesn't answer what you're ultimately looking for, then it was a waste of time, right?
And what we like about some of that stuff too is disseminating the information that is more client facing, that is not overwhelming to the individuals and the families that we work with, right? So a lot of that stuff, even though it can be in depth, we try to get it into easier terms that's important to show the families that we work with.
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point when you the listener, when you're saying, hey, it's time, I need to do an analysis, whether it's with the current person I'm at, whether it's with my work, whether it's with my coming in with meetings like you or I or whatnot, but I just need an analysis. There's different parts of different things have changed, whether I haven't looked at it in a long time, whether I've had a life event change, whatever. I need to do the analysis. What is it that should be on that? I think is really, really important. And what you're saying, Mike, in the level of communication and the idea of what you're looking for, that I think is the hardest part of this, is making sure it's in your terms. So like terms you can understand. Different people have different philosophies, right? Years and years ago, maybe some of you have heard this. I heard the DISC philosophy, and it explained different people, and DISC, and it was like D was dominant style of personality, so they listened to things a certain way. I was more of a somebody that wanted more information. S was more somebody that was more safer, and so they listened to things differently. And C was more calculating or more analytical. And so each of those different personalities, and there's 100 different ways that people explain different personalities. That was just the one I could think of off the top of my head. But the different personalities are going to hear things differently. And sometimes that's different among spouses, right? A husband and a wife might process information differently. And so that's really important when you're talking about analysis, is what is the information that you need? And so I think that's a key point to keep that in mind.
Yeah. And most of these analyzing tools will go in depth if need be, but the average consumer does not need to go, that in depth.
They're hiring you. They want to know you know it.
That's why we have jobs, right? Yeah,
exactly
right. So, well, let's start talking about the first kind of analyzing, most people, when they're talking to a financial advisor, is they're trying to analyze their individual investments themselves.
Sure.
So when you're dealing with some of that analysis there, again, you're using different tools that are out there. What are we looking for with that, John?
Well, I think the natural inclination that people are going to talk about is going to be performance and how is it performing? What is it doing? But a good analysis is going to compare to something else, right? Because if you got a 6% rate of return, is that good or bad, right? And different personalities are going to say, hey, if I say you got a 6% rate of return, some personality might say that's great. But another personality might say, well, what did everybody else do?
The market's done dead,
right.
So yeah.
And so but different personality might say, well, that's all I needed. I'm ecstatic. I mean, there's different ways of looking at it. But when we're looking at it, or when we think what a person should be looking at it in an analysis, is what did that do in relation to, let's say, a benchmark, right? What did your fund XYZ do in relation to the Dow Jones, the NASDAQ, the S&P 500, the Russell, the main indexes,
or the asset mix that they have? Yeah,
for sure, absolutely. So I think that's the first thing. You're going to look at the funds or holdings. Maybe it's not just an individual funds. If you're in a work account, a lot of times it's going to be funds. That's how the work account is set up. But if it's an individual account, maybe you have stocks and bonds or whatnot. So I think that's where you're to start with.
And I think it's important when we're talking about performance, a lot of the performance depends on what the risks that they're taking. So a lot of the analyzing tools that we use will say, okay, you're getting a, let's say the 6% return you talked about, but based on the risk you're taking, you should be getting 10%,
Sure.
And
so
so
that's a really good point.
So a lot of it is, or you're getting 12%, but the risk you should be you're only getting, you should be getting 10%. So you're outperforming that. So a lot of that is analyzing the individualized portfolio to find out, are you getting the return versus the risk you're taking?
And of course, we talk about this. There's a different phase of planning. There's a different thing that you should be looking at if you're listening to this of, yes, I need this analysis, but what is that analysis going to tell you, right? And that's a different conversation. We're not going to go necessarily into that today as far as, well, do you need a 10% rate of return, or do you need let's ignore that for right now. What you're saying is, are you getting what you're quote unquote paying for? Is the juice worth the squeeze, right? That's what you should be looking at it on the first step, on the performance.
Well, and so when you're looking at the performance too, a lot of it is what does that asset mix, look like?
Sure.
So, a lot of the tools will show you, okay, well, how much you in stocks versus bonds, for example. But not only that, what is the asset mix in the stocks? Because the philosophy has changed dramatically. What it should have been, the asset mix maybe 10 years ago versus what the asset mix is today.
Well, and there's a part of that too, that is different families will have different concepts with that too. So there might be a family that says, what is my asset mix? Oh, I don't want to have this holding. We're seeing that more often. I don't want this particular style holding or this particular style holding in my portfolio. So we're seeing that a little bit different too in the analysis of people saying, I didn't think I had company XYZ. And we say, no, you have 6% of your overall portfolio is that company. And so that's part of the analysis too, I think, is what, not just the overall asset mix, like you're talking about from a financial side of how risky or aggressive or small cap, large cap, the financial conversation, but it's also the specifics that people might be concerned about. Hey, I don't want to invest in, I'm just pulling something out of the air. I don't want to invest in, tobacco, right? And I'm not picking on that, but I'm just saying, some people will tell us that I don't want this style holding. I literally had a potential person say that to me the other day. I don't want this holding. Can you make sure it's not in my portfolio?
Well, and a lot of times too, we see when we do these, the analysis is the overlap. The people think that they have a diversified portfolio and they may be in, several different funds or several different ETFs, but then we come to find out, okay, but each one of these ETFs holds, Google and Microsoft and
NVIDIA nowadays,
NVIDIA,
you're gonna have
Amazon, So what we're finding out then is now they're overexposed, oftentimes just technology in general, just to specific investments. And so sometimes it may be okay, maybe 1% in 6 different of their portfolios, but then they find out that now it's 6 or 7% of their portfolio is in a handful of stocks.
Well, and I think something you said there is really, really important. When a person's looking for an analysis, it's easy to find tools online. Almost everything you have, if you have a 401k, a 403b, you have a work account or whatnot, they'll have analysis tools in that software, but they're only analyzing that, right? My wife has a work account and it tells us all the time, well, you're on pace for retirement if you want this income. And she says to me, well, is that good or bad? They're not taking into account all the other things that we might have. And so that's where an analysis that we're talking about in this situation is, how do we compare all of it together? Like you just said, hey, you might have 1% holding of something in a bunch of different funds, but then you look at the big picture and go, wait a minute, that's not just it. I have 6 accounts. It's not just 6% because one account is more. Yeah. I saw a family a few years ago, right when they were getting ready to retire, and we were looking at his work-based retirement account, and he had just been going, well, when you looked at his overall portfolio, he had fully 10% of his portfolio in one individual company. And I said, were you planning on that? Because if you were, let's optimize this. We can make this easier. That was not his intent. And so that's where an analysis will catch those outliers.
And I think importantly too, when we were talking about risk versus reward, some of the software will do more like what we call a scatter plot, which will chart out your investments, and again, and just kind of put you on the range versus are you getting the return versus the risk, and it's just a visual that people can kind of see and say there might be some outliers there or something, just maybe 1 or 2 holdings that are not performing like they should, or that are that are superstars we should keep, right? So
it's hard with a podcast like this, with our licensing. We can't say use this company or use this company, right? Yeah. I mean that we're not sponsored by anybody, and we're not recommending any particular company. So there are examples when you're looking for a generic analysis, like you said, or like we were talking about just now, performance, and how does that do it? A scatter plot is something almost any company can put that together, and you can look and say, where am I at my risk component to where I should be. There's other visuals that might give you examples that might be easier, or you might be looking for as well. There are actually risk scores you can look at, correct? So a score based out of 100, and we all can emotionally think, or not emotionally, logically think, well, if 100 is the riskiness and 0 is not risky, where am I at in my portfolio, right?
And then where should you be based on an analysis too?
Yeah.
So sometimes you'll have a risk score, and then you'll do a risk analysis with your advisor, and find out, okay, well, they're not matching up, right? And so, and oftentimes too, it needs to change when you retire, right?
Well, and that's another point that maybe I think you had mentioned this earlier. As we were kind of prepping for the show, you had talked about risk scores that might be different for different parts of your life or different holdings, right? We talk about our bucket planner now, soon and later buckets. Different buckets might be different risk scores, right? So,
yeah. Well, and a lot of it too, when you're doing an analysis, when we say you had made a great point about looking at everything, right? Because sometimes it's not just asset allocation, it's the asset location, right? And finding out, okay, should a Roth be more risky than a traditional IRA, or money that you plan on using next year? So a lot of this comes down to, or income planning versus growth. So a lot of it is just, looking at the individualized portfolio, and, making sure that it is matching their risk versus the type of investment it is too.
Well, and so you mentioned it at the beginning, and you just kind of glossed over it really quickly, and I think it's something we have to bring back. So if you're looking at an analysis, you're looking at the 3 basic components, right? Taxes, risk, and fees. And so we talked a lot about tons and tons of tools that can show risk. I think in that situation, if I were to summarize my own way of saying, when you're looking at risk, you can see it in any fashion that fits you. If you are an analytical person, there are tools out there that can dive really in depth, and you can get really granular and look at PE ratios and the alpha, and you can look at and that's there if you want to see it. And if you want to see it, when you're getting the review, you should know you can ask for that.
We have it done. Yeah,
absolutely. And whoever you're talking with should be providing that. Or if you're doing your own analysis, it's there. But if you just want more high level, hey, am I going to run out of money? Right? There are tools that do that as well, and you can organize that. And so when it comes to risk, you can kind of, quote unquote, solve for any situation. Hey, I want to know how the performance is compared to everybody else. Or high level, can I retire? Do I have enough money? So there's different financial tools that, whether it's us or someone else or you yourself, can find that can do those things. So I think that's the first thing you should be looking at is risk, right?
Risk is yeah, that's exactly right. But I guess you're right. The fee analysis becomes really important as well.
Absolutely.
And so when we're looking at that, a lot of the firms don't really concentrate on the fee analysis because sometimes, frankly, it's expensive, right?
Well, and I think that's kind of one of those components that has changed over time as far as you're seeing more companies now. It was kind of the dirty little secret for many, many years. Yep, fees are charged. You're seeing more companies now be very fee transparent.
Yeah, transparent
We
is
are
the key.
we
Yeah.
ourselves are very transparent on our fees and but a fee is, you can't say, I'm paying this fee, what would you pay? Like you, the listener, can't just say, what exactly is your fee? First off, if you're asking me that, my licensor privilege, I might not know exactly what I would recommend for you or whatnot. And it can be different in situations. There's different ways financial people can get paid. And so in that situation, a fee analysis, you just want to look at where you're at. And I guess, again, going back to what you said, are you getting the results for the fee you're paying, right? If you're paying, and I think a really, if I'm paying a very large fee, but I'm getting a better return than everybody else, maybe I'm not that
I'm
upset
okay with
with
that.
my fee,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if I'm paying next to nothing in fee and I'm also getting next to nothing in service, maybe I'm still, I'm cutting off my nose to spite my face, right? So it depends on that conversation.
Well, and yeah, we oftentimes see the reverse as well, because there are a lot of, fund companies and ETFs that have these low cost fees. And so
Sure.
they've been, touted for many, many years that, why would you pay a fee when you can do it, inexpensively? The issue is, though, oftentimes you're not getting the returns either, and so, or the tax advice or anything else that's involved with it. And so, you're dealing with it. We just can't, the fee is a component. It's not
Sure.
the end all be all either, right?
But it is a part of things. It is something you have to pay attention to. Just when it comes to a fee, I think I would caution, there are many people that are fee conscious. You don't want the fee to disrupt what you're trying to get in service or what you're trying to accomplish, right? I understand that when I go to a restaurant, if I go to a nicer restaurant, it's probably going to be a little bit more expensive. I also understand, because it's more expensive, I'm probably paying a little bit more on the tip if I'm tipping a percentage of the meal, right?
Exactly.
But I'm also expecting better service there than I would get at a restaurant where I'm not as much. And I don't mean that mean or anything like that. That's just the expected, why I'm okay paying that amount of money if I'm
Exactly.
going to that for that experience at the time.
No, that's a really good point. Is a lot of it is, what are you getting for the fees that you're paying? But frankly, a lot of it is just people just don't know. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
when you do a fee analysis, good, bad, or indifferent, if it's low, high, or in the middle, just because some of the investments themselves have hidden fees too, and so it's just understanding what the fee structures are.
Well, and I think having a conversation with people about that, I think it is really important as far as, okay, what are you trying to accomplish with things? And if the number one goal is to have the least fee possible, then you're going to get certain things. If the number one goal is to have the best return possible or the best experience, all of it will be adjusted based on that. So it is something important to ask. I think it is also something to look at. Again, our jobs, yes, our licenses are privileged and we're not, not everybody can necessarily do this job. But on the other side, it is something that you look at and say, we do a lot of work and we provide a service. So we understand we're going to get compensated for it. But what a family's looking for when it comes to a fee is how does it fit into their story? How is it
Exactly
part
right.
of their situation? And that's, I think, really important to say.
So we talked about risk, we talked about fees, but there is one other important component, right?
Yeah, the one that's often overlooked.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the analysis, absolutely.
And what would that be, John?
So we said it would be taxes, risk, and fees, right? And so in that situation, this is one of the things that maybe makes us unique, right? Maybe not everybody's having this conversation. Certainly people that have been referred to us or we hear this from people, that is their story, that they're not getting this review all the time. But we think it is really, really important that you should analyze what your tax footprint is and what that situation is. Because again, not all money is taxed the same. So, and you might not necessarily know whether you're paying more than your fair share or not, right? I mean, it's a silly thing, but ask yourself while you're listening to this, do you know how other family members or maybe your best friends or maybe your neighbors, do you know how they file their taxes? And the answer oftentimes is no, because it's a taboo subject. So a tax analysis is really, really important.
Or how your individual investments affect your individual tax bracket.
Absolutely.
It becomes really important. So let's walk through what a tax analysis would look like, John.
So I think in that situation, there's a couple different ways you can look at it. So one would be, you actually can look at a tax return. There is software that we would use or that you can use that you have access to that would actually look at your return, and it would generate a here's common options or analysis that we've noticed for example, you're in this tax bracket. If you donate money, you can move to this tax bracket, or you're in this tax bracket, you make too much money to contribute to an IRA. Maybe you should do a backdoor Roth IRA conversation, right? So it's going to give you examples of an analysis of just what some options may be for future planning. So there is software that will do that for people.
Yeah, so you can look at it through, even the tax analysis themselves through different lenses, So
Okay.
part of it is looking at the taxes themselves and seeing how the investments and maybe their overall tax bracket is impacted by certain events, right?
Right.
And so what's cool about using some of the software that's out there is we can literally do, numerous scenarios.
Sure.
And, if you give you an example right now, because just the last few years, although the interest rates are going down now, the CD rates have been so significant that a lot of people are generating interest income. And now we're finding out that, now that they've had full years of earning, over 5% in some of the interest bearing accounts, it's affecting their overall tax bracket, and so especially if they're in retirement, it may affect their Social Security taxes and other things, or if they're taking too large of an IRA distribution in retirement too, it may affect their overall taxes. So a lot of it is just, analyzing the individual tax bracket itself. But besides that, sometimes if they're in an after-tax portfolio, how does that impact their individual, their individual tax situation?
Well, and I think that's really important. I think the other part with that is, so you look at the tax analysis on the front side, but if you're looking at things, then you can also analyze, well, what are my options going forward?
Exactly right.
Right? What can I do to mitigate this? What can I do to change things? How does it fit into my overall ideas, my portfolio, et cetera? How can I move forward, and what are some options there? So you can look at an analysis that will actually give you a tax plan, so to speak, or some options. Hey, if you want to do Roth conversions, if you want to do a tax loss harvesting, if you want to do some charitable giving, if you want to do some donor advised funds, or different examples of things, if you want to do those things, what does that look like, right? And so there's software that will actually do that. And there are individuals that'll calculate that for you. Boy, if you want to sit down with somebody, there's somebody that'll do pen to paper and show that to you. It's a lot easier with some of the software out there.
Well, and not only that, especially utilizing some of the older strategies that have been used for years and years and years that were very productive for many, many years. But a lot of these, whether it's a managed portfolio or some of the old mutual funds that are, especially in the after tax, are generating capital gains and dividends. And whether that portfolio made money that year or lost money, oftentimes it still shows up on your tax return, And so some of that analyzing tools will kind of just show what are we looking for. There's a buzzword we use a little bit too when they're doing a managed portfolio, what they call turnover ratio, which basically means they're doing a lot of buying and selling. And if they're doing buying and selling, we're even sometimes seeing short-term capital gains that are being now pushed over to a tax return. So it's just being conscious of some of those types of things and utilizing the analyzing tools that can kind of show you some of that stuff. And again, it's not a big, huge concern for everybody. But there's been research that have shown that, that the average individual is paying, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars more over their lifetime in taxes than they need to because they're not utilizing, some of the proper tax strategies.
I think the thing to keep in mind on the big picture, if we're kind of wrapping this idea up, is for an analysis, you're not just looking at your funds, right, or at your holdings. You are looking at them, but you're looking at them in relation to other things and what you're trying to accomplish. And there's many ways to do that. You're also looking at fees, but don't forget about the taxes. It's really important, right? That's a really important part to do an analysis on. And if you're not getting that, make sure you're adding that in when you're doing an analysis.
And not only the tax analysis themselves, but what the impact might be of doing Roth conversions in the future too.
Sure.
As if you do a Roth conversion, or we call it a strategic Roth integration strategy, we can actually, calculate that and look at what the impact would be, over your life expectancy. But looking at some of those, whether, I don't care who you're working with, just don't forget that might be a very impactful situation for you individually, especially in your younger retirement years.
Well, and I think the other part of that is, I agree with everything you're saying. I think the only thing I would add, I guess I say it that way, I think the only thing I would add is this is going to change throughout life too, right? So you can do an analysis at a spot in life, unfortunately, you probably need to do it a few different times. That's part of the process. It's a difficult part for people to admit to this in a lot of situations, but it is one of those things where it's not like it's not like I can do that once and well, I'm done, I'm good forever. I was in a good situation. Life changes, family changes, assets change, etc. Laws change. So finding how you do your analysis is important, and then knowing how you can duplicate that, whether it's through a particular company like us, whether it's through your stuff you're doing on your own, what have you, knowing how you can duplicate that, I think is really important too. So you can compare, hey, I looked at this 5 years ago and I was at this spot. I looked at it now and I'm at this spot. I've improved. Awesome. Right.
It's an ongoing process.
Yes.
You're right. The analyzing does need to be done often, especially the tax analysis, can be done on an annual basis because you want to see how your individual tax bracket might fare, again, especially when you're on a fixed income, because you don't want the money that you have coming in every month going to Uncle Sam.
For sure. Really good point. So,
all right. So again, just making sure when you're dealing with your, analyzing what we're doing, we're analyzing both risk, fees, and taxes, or I should say all three, right? Not just both. Not just both. But regardless, we're looking at that and making sure that you get a complete analysis, and also what's important to you, because everybody is different, and we want to understand is if there's certain things that you're looking for, just communicate that with the advisors that you're dealing with.
Absolutely. Great point.
Okay. So next, let's talk about our holistic happenings. This is a segment that we're kind of stuff that we run into on an everyday basis, or we may run into a situation that we just want to communicate a little bit to the public, because this is some of the stuff that becomes really important.
I think the reason we put this segment in is because we do think this holistic planning conversation, we do think holistic is one of the things that makes us unique. And so we try and bring this in. So today I had an example that I just kind of wanted to bring up. I was in a situation where the idea came up of someone wanting to switch careers. And so the original conversation was, hey, John, I want to switch careers and this is what I'm doing. And I have this opportunity. I'm going to retire from here and start here. And this is the goal. And they kind of looked, and the family said, well, what does that entail? And in their mind, it was, I'm taking this and I no longer have it. I'm getting this. They were entirely looking at kind of their quality of life and what the pay change would mean. I brought in the components of all the holistic side. What did it mean at the old company? You had a retirement account there. You had some retirement funds, you had healthcare, you had different things that are changing now. What do we need to do about that? The new company, what is our healthcare situation? What's our retirement accounts there? Based on income, what does that do for our tax situation? Does it allow us more tax planning opportunities? Does it get rid of tax planning opportunities? Does it adjust in that situation? So from a holistic side, from their side, it was pretty simple. We like the new job. We're done with the old job, making a little bit more money. We're hopefully better quality of life, better hours, what have you. They like what they're doing a little bit better, et cetera. From the holistic planning side, the holistic financial planning side, it was, well, what does it mean for our taxes? What does it mean for our healthcare? What does it mean for our income? What does it mean for our retirement money? What does it mean for the future with all of those components? What analysis do we have to do? We were talking about analysis on this episode. What analysis do we have to do to make sure all of those things line up? And sometimes it's not just a one-to-one component. In this particular family situation, there was a concern of, okay, at the new job, what would that mean from a tax planning standpoint? Meaning, could we take the new job as a W-2 employee, as a 1099 versus a W-2 employee? Because at the previous job, he was 1099, and that gave us certain tax planning situations. At the new job, they wanted me W-2, and that was going to change his tax footprint. So that was part of the plan. So the holistic side of, remember, the estate planning, the taxes, the finances, the insurances, et cetera, bringing through all those in. So it was still a very good conversation to have. And he ultimately took his job and he's very happy with it, but it is a conversation that just came up last week in a holistic planning situation.
No, it is very unique because we, especially in the Detroit area here, we there's people that are offered buyouts or that are making transitions with their careers or early retirement. But there's oftentimes life-changing events, and I guess that's what the point I was trying to make is whatever that life-changing event, it is a good idea to have some type of sounding board so that you can look through different lenses and making sure that you're making the best decisions.
And ideally holistically, so you're not missing certain things. Yeah.
You're right.
Yep.
right.
Very good.
No, that's a good way to wrap it up.
Sure.
And so, thank you again for listening to the Retirable Podcast. If you do need to get a hold of us, you can go to our website, fsa1.com, or we can call the phone number, 1-800-977-9292. My name is Mike Wallace.
I've been John Sauger. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great day.
Insurance products are offered through the Insurance Business Financial Services of America, FSA. Financial Services of America is also a financial services practice that offers securities products and services through AE Financial Services, LLC, AEFS. Member FINRA SIPC. Financial Services of America is also an investment advisory practice that offers investment advisory products and services through FSA Advisors, FSAA, a registered investment advisor. AEFS and FSAA do not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by Financial Services of America are not subject to regulatory requirements and standards of care applicable to registered representatives, and are not subject to investment advisory requirements. AEFS, FSAA, and FSA are not affiliated companies. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. FSAA and AEFS are not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by FSAA and AEFS. Compliance reference 3989221-1124.